With the warmth and humidity of summer ahead, this week we talked about heat stress with Rob Eirich, Nebraska's Director of Beef Quality Assurance. University of Nebraska-Lincoln literature on the subject indicates how hard it is for cattle to enter warmer months. It takes animals 30 days to adapt to average temperatures changing from 50 degrees to 80 degrees. Their water needs increase too. When the thermometer is above 80, cattle need at least 20 gallons per day for every 1,000 pounds. We talked with Rob Wednesday in the R.B. Warren Arena on campus and began by asking about how heat stress can impact cattle.
When you start looking at high humidity, high heat times of the year as we're moving into our summer months, you really see a loss in feed efficiencies. You see possible health concerns, but you also see some mortality in these type of situations. If you get cattle way up into that high heat area where we see that dangerous impact, we see a lot of numbers impacting cattle here, especially in central to eastern Nebraska. It's a very big concern through the summer months.
What can producers do to help limit the effects of heat stress?
Well, I think one, they need to be prepared. Look at the forecast and kind of look at how that forecast is going to play out, and look at some of our tools that we have out there, our temperature humidity index, and kind of see, okay, if we're moving into this temperature and this humidity as a forecast, where are we? Is there an alert? Are we in a serious danger or an emergency scenario? And that way we can prepare ourselves ahead of time, giving additional water, shading, sprinklers, and those type of things.
How efficient or how important can water shading be in a feedlot?
Oh, it can be actually probably a big saver for them when we start talking about the morbidity scenario. And if we kind of if we can have additional water supply, open water supply, where those cattle have access to it easier and more often, that's going to be a key. If we can actually keep those cattle cooled down from the early temperature all the way through the peak of the day, and that might encounter some open air where they can get that airflow through, but also keeping those mounds sprinkled and keep them cool, because that moisture coming up, they can actually keep some cooling, keep that animal cooled down. But then we also look at other things. If you're looking at maybe improving or doing some improvements on the operation, shading has become a bigger effect. If we can, again, keep that body temperature cool as long as we can before they hit that peak of the day, that's going to help them as far as internally as well as their external temperatures.
Whether in the feedlot or in the pasture, how should you change the way you handle cattle during those hot days?
Well, definitely. We talk a lot about this through our BQA program. We want to make sure low stress handling, but we also, in the heat of the time, as we kind of look as we go in the summer months, we say we want to see you working those cattle prior to 8 o'clock in the morning, where that temperature is cool, the animals are cool, we don't have increased body temperatures at that time, and so it's a little bit easier on those cattle. But move them in a short distance, making sure that we only keep them in that processing facility for 30 minutes or less. That way we don't have a lot of heat buildup. And if we can do that, that's probably the key part of that processing and movement.
You said some people try to process at night or try to move around at night, but in some cases that might not be a good scenario.
Well, when we think about it, usually our peak temperatures kind of go from mid-morning to mid-afternoon. That's our peak external temperatures. That's our environmental temperatures. Well, we got to think about that metabolic temperature that body heat's creating from digestion and movement and those type of things. What happens is when you combine that core temperature of that animal increases. And so when you get that increase in temperature and that we hit the peak in the environmental temperature, well, now it takes that heat is still being absorbed, it takes probably 2 hours longer. And so that core temperature peaks after the environmental temperature, so now we have to allow that to cool down. So once that temperature starts cooling down outside, we still got 4 to 6 hours before that body temperature comes back down. So if we can reduce the stress by continually moving all of our processing to the morning, where they've had that evening to cool down.
You mentioned heat index. Tell me about the new heat temperature and humidity chart that you have and how people might find it useful.
Well, when you start looking at that chart, again, it's a tool to use to say, okay, they're forecasting 95 degrees at 30% humidity for the next week. How can we prepare ourselves now to make sure we have that supply, water supply, or making sure that we have those cattle where they need to be before we hit that time? That way we don't put any additional stress and movement. Maybe even look at, feeding times and those type of things to manage when those cattle might be able to relax and not increase that body weight.